Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner Podcast. I'm Dylan, I'm your host, and we have a special guest today. And because we are short on time for this episode, I'm going to get right into it instead of doing our normal BS back and forth, nice weather, shitty weather, or whatever Michigan decides to do this week. So, without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, Eddie, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name, Mazzu. You're going to correct me for sure, but is a former union ironworker turned lawyer. And so this is going to be for sure interesting. You're going to be our first lawyer on the show. But in 2009, after working for 10 years as a union ironworker, Eddie was seriously injured in a construction accident. And we're going to get into a ton of this, but rather than letting his injuries define him, he set out on a path to really redefine who he is. Went back to school, and we'll go through that whole journey. And in 2020, started his own personal injury law firm, Mazzu Law, and now has 3 offices in Buffalo, New York City, and Dallas. And probably most importantly, he is a husband and father of 3, and believes the true success starts at home. And that's something that we can for sure relate to, and is obsessed with personal development, which we're going to get all into, and really the mindset, and that you have, truly unlimited potential within you. So with that, Eddie, welcome to the Construction Corner Podcast.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you guys having me on the show, and I really look forward to getting into all things construction, personal development, family, business, the whole, whatever we venture into, I'm ready for it.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you, man.
I guess the first thing is, tell us about some of the projects you worked as a union ironworker. I think you're actually, so we've had Zach on the show, who works with, and is a welder, so works with plenty of metals, just on the ground and not necessarily up in the air. So tell us about being a union ironworker.
Absolutely. So back when I was 19 years old, I was at that, great crossroads that we all find ourselves after high school, where am I going to the military? Am I going to go to college? Am I going to find a job? Like, I didn't really have a plan, so to speak. And it just sort of happened that an opportunity came about to start the apprentice program as an ironworker. I didn't even know what an ironworker was at the time. I showed up on my first job site with no hard hat, no tools, no clue, no clue whatsoever. And one of the old timers, sort of took me under his wing. It's one of those stories, and brought me over to his truck, gave me a tool belt and a hard hat. And, we went from there and finished the apprenticeship, worked all over. I started in Buffalo, New York, worked all over sort of Western New York. And then it's interesting, 9/11 happened my first year as an apprentice, and everybody knows where they were for 9/11, but I desperately wanted to go and do whatever I could to get to New York and help. Ironworkers were helping, all different trades were helping, and firefighters and cops. But my business agent was like, no, you're too green. You've been here for like a year. You can't go down there and get involved in that kind of a situation. So the whole time I was a Buffalo ironworker, I was sort of itching to get out of town a little bit. And it turned out that they say about 10 years to become, like a seasoned journeyman. So after about 8 years, I boomed out to Las Vegas. And that's probably the coolest job that I worked on. I built City Center in Las Vegas on the Strip, and I was there for about a year and worked in the raising gang with Los Angeles's finest, and most definitely the greatest experience as an ironworker, just to sort of be on that one big job, the biggest job you could imagine for a guy from Buffalo.
That's awesome, man. So you're the guy swinging big steel, like way the hell up at the top of these massive, massive buildings. How long did it take you to get used to that? Get used to the heights and just you said you started as a greenhorn at 18 or 19. It's got to have some bumps along the way, I would think, getting up there.
Absolutely. And it's interesting is that for me, like, I knew as soon as I showed up on the first job, it happened to be, there's plenty of different aspects of ironworking, from like reinforcing steel, laying the rebar on the roads and the bridges, to structural steel, which is, hotels, casinos, bridges that are the structural iron. When I was on that first job, it just so happened to be a job where there was a crane and there was new iron being installed, and everyone had their sort of hierarchy of the trades and hierarchy within the ironworkers. And I saw the connectors who were on the opposite ends of each piece of steel that was going up. And they were like the alpha dogs on the job. And it was obvious. And I looked right at the first guy I saw and I'm like, I have to do that. Whatever that is that they're doing, I have to be in that position. So it's like a dogfight to get some of those jobs because everybody wants to be the connector. And in the old days, they used to make some more money, not so much maybe in some of the more blue collar, rustic cities like Buffalo and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. But in the old days, and especially still in Manhattan and out west, I know for sure, the raising gang usually gets some extra perks in the paycheck. So you're making money for the company, you're helping move the production of the project along when you're doing it safely, doing it right, but you're also really efficient at getting 100 pieces or however many pieces is the standard of today. But when you're putting that kind of steel in position and helping the company out and doing it right, they tend to take care of their people. So I wanted all of that. But unfortunately in Buffalo, if you want to work, there's not always a tower crane in town. So you have to learn all those aspects. So you might find yourself crawling under a furnace at an old refinery or putting rebar in for a couple seasons, which I did plenty of that as well.
Wow. So you kind of spanned every aspect of it. That's cool. I mean, that gives you kind of a really well-rounded background in ironwork, I would think, versus the guy that just kind of pigeonholes into one thing.
Yeah, I think it's important because, you just need to sort of see where everybody's coming from in the trenches. There's totally different mindset, totally different way of life. And they're all very dignified and very respectable. And I learned a lot about like really becoming a man as an iron worker. That was the sort of, rite of passage, if you will, into manhood. Like your dad can only do so much with a boy, but when you go out there amongst men and learn, getting up every day at 4 a.m., what it takes to get the job done, that is the way, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you mentioned deciding not to go in the military, deciding whether to. I'm not slighting the military at all. I have the utmost respect for them, but starting off in the trades, it's almost like a boot camp in and of itself, right? Like it's trial by fire, and you damn well better perform if you want to stick around.
Well, I have an interesting story. Even 8 years in, you talk about trial by fire. When I went to Las Vegas, I wanted to go and be in the raising gang, right? But this was a massive job, and anybody who was coming from LA to do that. And I told the foreman the first day that I got there that, hey, I'm a connector, right? I'm a connector from Buffalo. And he said, oh, you're a connector. Let's go. I'll go introduce you to the raising gang. And it was the night of their bowling league that they were all like hanging out and doing. And it was like a scene from a movie. I walked in and there was all these like badass guys from Los Angeles. They were tight, like a family unit, these 5 guys, 2 connectors, 2 guys on the ground hooking on, and the radio phone man. And together they were like, they've traveled all across California and Vegas together. And it was just like, hey, this is Eddie. He wants to be a connector, and they're on the job. And they all just kind of looked at me like, who's this guy? And it was an interesting night, but I ended up getting really tight with those guys and working with them for the entire duration of the job. And whenever one of them would rotate back to California, I would pop in and go connecting. So it was definitely an interesting and also a rite of passage to earn the respect of the guys in LA, which was important to me at the time.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that brings up a really good point. No matter what you're coming into, on the really, I mean, this is probably more in the trades, but it has its place within architecture and engineering too, is, earning that rite of passage, those taking your lumps, taking your hits through that. I mean, you kind of mentioned it for the job in Vegas, but I mean, across everywhere you've worked, how important is that to come in with I'm going to say open mind, but also some humility, in trying to assess, everything. Cause like, it sounds like those guys are super tight, they've been doing this for years and years. It was the 5 guys and that was the core. Right. And that's not an easy thing to get into. So for everyone out there, right, because we've got some young people listening, like where maybe it's not always the easiest thing to get in, or you think you deserve, I'm going to use that, something sooner than you probably do. So, but how did you approach that for this in particular, for such a big job, for such a prestigious, and big building?
That's a great point. The first and most important thing is showing up, right? Showing up in all aspects of life is important, but I mean, like really showing up, like with intention that you're going to go to somewhere, you're willing to learn, you're willing to, have humility and not have ego kind of get in the way of what you're trying to accomplish. When I went out there, I was intimidated. I was really intimidated, especially because Los Angeles 433 is a structural only union within the ironworkers. So the guys in that union, they didn't do rebar sometimes. They didn't do going under furnaces and changing out bearings. They only hung iron. So that local, their training, their regimen for their guys was hanging and banging constantly. Derrick floor, how they cut it loose, how everything was so systematized. I was not used to that. I was more used to, we have some structural jobs. So going out there and, just getting an opportunity it was really important to me, but trying to make the most of it and being open to learning and having to have some thick skin, because you're going to get, your chops busted, especially when you're, going into new places where people have been doing anything for an extended period of time. It's just a matter of not letting that pride ego thing get too bruised and be willing to learn, because most of the time people just want to see sort of what you're made of. And once you kind of pass their own little inner test, you're golden. And those guys, I'm still tight with those guys to this day. We still message each other about football games and whatnot. And it's great because I haven't seen them in 10 years and you'll get a random text or I'll shoot a random text, all because you had to earn it, right? You earned that respect by doing the work, by showing up and showing that you weren't someone who was going to tuck tail and run when, things got tough or when somebody started screaming at you or you made a mistake, right? People make mistakes. So don't be afraid of any of that stuff. Stay open-minded and just be willing to learn. And you really can't go wrong in any industry. I don't care if it's law, construction, or working in a high pressure kitchen. It doesn't matter. You just have to show up and be ready to say, no matter what you do, I'm still going to show up tomorrow and be ready to learn. You can scream at me all you want, right?
Yeah, that's the name of the game, man. It's brutal in the construction industry, especially, but you just got to have a thick skin, right? You got to learn how to communicate. You got to be able to deal with it. And once you get to that next level, then you try and remember that for the next guy coming up behind you, right? Like, well, that was pretty shitty when I got my ass kicked that one day. So I'm gonna teach them in a different way. But everybody's got to take the tongue lashing, certainly.
Absolutely. And I did feel that way, the same way. I personally never was into bashing the apprentice, because I did, we all got it in from some different angle. And it was just like, that's not who I am. It doesn't matter like what anybody else did to get me prepared. I know that there's sometimes a different way to, connect with people and make sure people are, there for the right reason. We're trying to work, you're trying to complete a project, you're trying to send everybody home, and you're trying to make some money, right? Everybody's trying to feed their families and build a life around whatever it is they're doing. So that's kind of the overarching goal. So you kind of remember that when you're in there getting, giving somebody the business for your own, whatever reason that comes from.
Yeah.
Well, and in that too, so you'd mentioned, that first day on the job, right? The guy giving you a tool belt and hard hat because you didn't know, right? You just showed up, which is, again, that's half the battle. But along the way, how important have mentors been for you? And, or those guys that gave you some extra attention, that, kind of gave a shit about you as a person, and like took you under their wing? Like, how important has that been for you throughout your career?
That is one of my favorite questions. And I'll tell you this, because I've had my own experiences, and then not until later on in the last 5 years, sort of understanding personal development and how to manage and lead people, and listening to people like Andy Frisella and Ed Milet and like the Arate Syndicate. Ed talks about this concept a lot, but all the way through from the time I was an apprentice to right now, as I sit here as a lawyer, you've met people, and I've met people who have recognized something in you that you knew was in yourself. And when those certain people, whatever positions they're in, if they're a foreman on a job or even somebody at the office, if they identify something within you that you know to be true about yourself, and then sort of say something or make you feel a certain way, it has like the most profound inspirational effect in the whole world. And that has happened to me in almost every industry that I sort of delved into, whether it was being an iron worker or going back to college after I got hurt on the job, and I ended up working at the Buffalo News for a little internship program. But while I was there, the editor-in-chief, made a couple comments to me about an ability to write and that some gift, and they see something in you that, and then even as a lawyer, the first partner at the firm that I worked at had that same concept, like pulled me off to the side and been like, hey, you got something in you that, resonates with people. You've got this story, or this iron worker who got hurt, who didn't just, throw in the towel and quit. And now you speak the construction language, but you're also on this lawyer side, and you aren't somebody who's not able to, do whatever you want in this industry. You can, go try cases and connect with people. And when you meet those people and those mentors, it just fills you up with such fire and like energy that not only do you want to go run through a brick wall and definitely, push yourself as hard as you can, you want to go and try to do that for other people because you know what it felt like for you, right? So when Ed Milet talked about recognizing the 1, 2, or 3, whatever they are, innate talents or traits of another person in your organization, so to speak, and then talking to them about it and tying it to your organization of how they can succeed because of that, you're really like on like level 10 out of 10 in the leadership department on inspiring people who want to come to work and be ready to kick ass, and and then hopefully they're compensated for doing that ass kicking, because when they win and we win and everybody wins, it just works better, right?
Yeah, and so real quick on that piece, for pay and A-level players want A-level opportunity. If you can't give A players A-level opportunity, you're SOL. And that came from the chairman founder of Blackstone in his book, What It Takes. Like that's what it is. Like that's one of the biggest keys, is giving those A players A opportunities, and you got to pay them like A players to keep them around.
100%.
So,
they're going to leave if you don't. They're just going to leave.
Yes, exactly.
yeah, I mean, they need opportunity, they need to be challenged, and they need to be paid accordingly. Those are the 3 things. But an A player will outwork 10 plus, C players, right? Even some Bs, maybe 5 B players. An A player will do more for you than probably 5 B players and about 20 C players.
Yeah.
But with that, let's go back a little bit in kind of maybe not the injury itself, but after you got injured, what was that transition period like for you? Obviously, we fast forward 10 years from that industry, 12 years from that injury. What were those first 1, 2 years? What did they look like for you? And how was that transition period to decide to like, hey, I want to go back to school, or I want to, go to school? And what did that look like for you?
It's interesting. I had no backup plans. I actually started to like delve into my entrepreneurial journey because I was always a fitness guy. You're an iron worker. If you can climb columns and hang steel at, 10 stories above the ground, you kind of get an air about you. And I always played football and wrestling. So I had the build of like a good athletic physique, and I wanted to do something about it. Like I'm going to the gym every day after iron work, and I actually was going to take this home study course I bought the material for it to become a personal trainer, and I was going to work iron by day and be a personal trainer nights and weekends and get something going to that entrepreneurial nature that maybe I can, double dip and get some double income rolling in. And it was just so happened that I took 2 courses at the community college, and just in like anatomy, physiology, biology, just to help me with this home study course, because it was a lot, right? It was like, I have no experience in this world whatsoever, other than I can tell people to pick up certain weights and they'll look great. And then that summer that happened, I just bought my first house that same year. And that summer I fell off of like a swinging scaffold under this bridge. And it was just kind of an awkward scenario. And I hit my head on the bottom of the steel bridge girder. It was just very awkward fall, very awkward setup. It's hard to even explain it for most people to understand what I'm talking about, but I took a pretty solid shot to the back of the neck, head, and I already had some issues in my spine. So it was just kind of like enough is enough with herniated and bulging discs. And while I was home, my wife happened to be in undergrad at the time, and those wheels just started spinning while I was like, what are you going to do now? Like, what are you going to do now? You can just sit around and feel sorry for yourself, and what's that going to get you, right? And it it just, once those wheels started, when I'd seen her doing her work, and I would kind of look over her shoulder and think, you were pretty good in school. Hey, you just got 2 A's in those biology and anatomy classes. Like, that's got to count for something. You're not done yet. I was 29 years old. So it really was a matter of like a what if scenario for me. Like, what if I could just go back to school? And the next thing I knew, that workers' comp, being on disability, that was like an okay thing. Instead of looking for work, if you went back to school to retrain and do some type of vocational training, they left you alone and they said, that's fine. You can stay on workers' comp, get your degree. And that kind of just kept the wheels kept spinning and spinning. And it went from an associate's to a bachelor's to what if I could do law school? Like, what if I could do that? Right. And I never honestly thought that I could in the beginning stages of it. And once I started putting one foot in front of the other, staying focused, and I didn't have any of this personal development background at the time. So looking back, I know what it was. Now it was a burning desire to accomplish something that was within range of what I thought I could do this. And I wasn't going to be denied at that point. So one thing led to another. And in 5 years, I had done the associates, the bachelor's, the law degree. And then it just opened up, the floodgates of like, I can do more than I've even given myself credit for. And I know that everybody can do more than they give themselves credit for. A lot of times we just get caught up in our own story, or the story from 20 years ago that we've sort of agreed upon, that, hey, I missed my chance, or hey, I sort of, once I blew my knee out in high school football, that was kind of it for me. And people, including myself, tell themselves these things, and it kind of controls for years, because those subconscious, paradigms, those subconscious framework that you're operating under, it just messes up your whole life. And you don't realize that if you could just step out of it for a second and look, from the 30,000-foot elevation, you would see that nothing is over. If you're still here, anything is possible. That's why I say those things, but you just have to want to like make the change, right? And once you get past that initial, okay, that wasn't so bad, right? I took one step, I accomplished one thing. Hey, I started an LLC. Hey, I got one phone call. One guy wants me to come and do this job for him. And hey, that's amazing. So many people are starting to realize that, that while you're here, anything is possible, especially as the world becomes a smaller and smaller place with, information like you're putting out on your show, and a million other ways to go get information at your fingertips, and stop watching Netflix and the news so that you can be, influenced by the narratives that are not helpful. Go listen to people who are doing the big things, who are breaking those stereotypes, and realize that they are no different than you. And that's what I told myself. What makes them so different from me? Nothing. They're doing it and you're not. That's the difference.
I love that, man. I mean, you nailed it. A man's a man, right? We all put on our pants one leg at a time. Your story of overcoming adversity is, first of all, it's amazing. I commend you for taking the steps you did, and not just, cowering in a pool on the floor, because that takes some balls, man. It takes some balls and some serious determination to not just say, fuck it, I'm done, right? And I think, this whole blue collar badass thing that Dylan and I talk about a lot, that's that mentality, right? There's a million different options in the construction industry. And I'll be honest with you, I never thought law was one of them. You're changing my mind on that today. But my point is, like, I'm sorry that happened to you, first and foremost, and I would never wish anybody get hurt, but it's not an end. It's not a sentence, right? There's other, if you still like the industry, you still want to be tight to it, there's so many other paths you can go and other things you can do. You can slide into the office, or we don't even need to list them. There's so many, but it's really cool to hear your story. And like, I hope people listening are recognizing that what you just said, man, that's the key. It's you got to keep one foot in front of the other and keep moving forward. And as long as you can do that, there's not a goddamn thing you can't accomplish.
Right. I mean, I could go on that subject. I don't want to go off too far, but it has been a blessing, right? You say these things, like you hear people say the silver linings and stuff. I do believe, and I know there's some really bad things that can happen, and I don't want to make light of any one of them for people, but there's always some form. If you can just have the perspective shift, there's something to learn from it, something to gain from it or grow from it. And it might not be easy, because I can imagine some pretty horrific things that people have gone through, as compared to, me getting physically injured that I could think of. But if you can just do the work on yourself and figure out who you are, what makes you tick, what you're actually about and what you want to try to do while you're here, don't like ignore those callings within, like explore them a little bit. Doesn't mean you have to quit your 9 to 5 tomorrow. It's not what we're saying at all. We're just saying, go explore that a little bit so that you're not just on autopilot to where your life, I was talking about this the other day, where your life is when you hear people say, oh, he's just set in his ways. Yeah, because that's what most people do. They get to what Benjamin Franklin said, most men die at 25. We just don't get around to burying them till they're 75. Why would he say that? He would say that because once you're learning and growing and all these great changes are happening as you're going through childhood and adolescence, and then you become a man or a grown-up or a woman, and all of a sudden life kind of just flatlines a little bit, where the routine gets pretty old, and that's like a one-way ticket to a midlife crisis. But you can avoid all of that without quitting your job by just doing that personal development work of figuring out what you can do to be a better person every day. And it's that alone has changed my life, so that even if people, I'm not telling people you have to make a certain dollar amount, but just I'm trying to be a better husband every day, a better father, and I come up short. So when I do the work, I make sure the next day I can try a little bit harder when that same scenario is in front of me, instead of doing the auto response, which is, that's just who I am. No, it's not. That's bull. That's bull. That's who you've allowed yourself to become, right?
Yeah, it's so many people do that. They set it on cruise control and wake up 30 years later and they're pissed off. And they, you look back and what the heck, what did I accomplish? What did I do? That sounds more miserable to me than anything I can imagine, right? It's constant growth is the name of this game. It's 1% improvement every day. Ed Milet says all the time, these things happen for us, not to us. And you got to be able to shift your mindset to follow that, to overcome anything, even if it's something small, right? You overcame something enormous, but even just the day-to-day garbage that comes up, you just gotta take it and use it to your advantage rather than let it own you.
Absolutely.
Eddie, we got a few more questions and all that good stuff, but where can they find you?
So on Instagram, it's at the Ironworker Lawyer, and on Facebook, it's just my name, Eddie Mazzu. On our firm's website is mazzulaw.com. Thank you.
Yeah. So guys, go follow Eddie. Obviously you're getting a bunch of good stuff. We for sure need to have you back to actually talk about legal stuff, because I don't think we're even going to get there today, but we definitely need to have you back, talk about like actual law things. But this is so important, guys, the personal development side of it, the mindset pieces of it. This is a big deal. We talk about a lot of this stuff too, but to have you on and someone who's gone through, it's a fairly big life change from going to hanging steel to, putting a suit on, is, there's a couple things, right? Like, you've never missed your shot, and you've still got chances to get up, and you're really one decision away. And it's those small steps every day that you need to take for somebody that might be going through a hard time, through these, whether it's, they could have lost their job, they could have been injured, they could have had something tragic happen to them, they maybe lost a loved one, they've gone through something bad. What are the small steps that really helped you to get through those times of, what's next, like, and to help you make that decision? Because once that decision was made, I'm sure it was much easier, but in that time of indecision, what were maybe those small steps that you made?
Well, it's constantly like, it's hard to answer with those, sort of sense of tragedy. And I don't know that this is like the answer, right? I'm just using my own experience to say that I knew no matter what was happening, no matter how bleak it looked, and no matter how much I thought I screwed my own life up, and now I'm injured and I didn't have any plans, or I didn't have any money. I felt like a loser, right? Like I felt like the biggest loser in the world. And my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, I started having a lot of insecurity thoughts that were going on in my mind, because here I am, I was supposed to be the iron worker and this alpha guy that could, protect my wife and my girlfriend and lift anything and be anything. And now I'm not that person anymore. So the mental part of it I can speak on that, the depression, anxiety, stress, fear. I had to do like a radical shift of mindset. And the only way that I know to do a radical shift of mindset is to go deep within, right? Go and actually do. There's so many good, not good, great works of literature that can have you start asking the right questions to yourself, to question all of those why questions of why things are, why does this happen to me, why me? And you start to realize that there is no why me, that's just totally ego based and on this personality that you've cultivated. And once you get deeper than ego and you get beyond your personality, it's a lot easier to process information. It's a lot easier to sort of move in those difficult times, because you start realizing that it's not as bad as you're making it out to be. Even I can imagine the really bad stuff, but you're still here and you still have other people that depend on you, that are looking to you to be a symbol of strength. And for me, I always want to be that, not for ego, but for other people to know that we're still here, we're still going, we still have to push through. And there will be a silver lining. There will be something to learn from it. So I had to do the work, and the work to me was reading as many books as I could get my hands on. And I'm not done yet. Like I'm not all set here, ready to, take on the world with no problems. There's a constant daily practice and daily routine of going back and getting that centeredness. And then you kind of operate from there. And it's just hard to sort of explain, but it's easier to operate from that position of being centered when you know who you are, you know what you stand for and what you believe in, and you actually want to still enjoy this life because it's a gift. So when you have to get to that place, or else you're just going to have the bitterness kind of souring everything. And that's not going to help anyone. It's not going to help you for sure. So I started to say, like, then why live there? Then why stay there? If it's a dark and ugly place, let's try to move from that. And I know that's not like the clearest answer, but it can be, I don't want to make my suffering and my injury overshadow other people who have way worse things to deal with. So I know that's like a dark answer, but you are the answer. You are the solution. You are the problem and the solution, but you have to go and figure that stuff out. And only you can go do it. No one's going to do it for you. Even though there's external sources to go and pour into yourself, the answer, you'll find it on the inside.
That's just it,
I got
man.
nothing, man. That was fantastic.
And everyone's got their own hard, right? Like everyone's hard is different. And so it's not that yours is any worse or harder than anybody else's. There's for sure maybe quote more tragic things, but it's still hard, no matter what it is. Like your injury was hard. Someone losing, somebody is hard. And I think it's exactly what you talked about, being able to go inside yourself to find those pieces, and figuring out who you are, not what you do, right? You identified as an iron worker for 10 years, and now you identify probably differently, right?
Not even as a lawyer.
Yeah. But it's that identity shift of, it's not just what you do, right? And I think a lot of us get wrapped into, well, I'm an engineer, I'm an iron worker, I'm a general contractor, versus, I'm a good dude, man. I'm just trying to get better. Right. Like, and that's a very different way to look at life, and I'm just trying to get better. I am a person. I am a husband, a father, whatever it is, a wife, a mother. You can identify different ways, and how you introduce yourself defines a lot about who you are in that identity of a person. So I think for you, obviously you went from ironworker to, how do you identify yourself today?
I call myself the ironworker lawyer, but I identify as just a person who's trying to be the best person that he can be. Really, that's what I wake up, and that's my aspiration for every day. So within that sphere, it becomes best friend, best husband, best father, best lawyer, best anything. Not best in terms of like the judgment of being better than anyone else, just the best version of me. And I know that it's a constant, there's no end to how far you can take that. So I'll never like reach anything. It's just a matter of striving every day toward being a little bit better, those atomic habits, that compound effect of just a little bit better. You touched on that earlier. And that's really it. I try to help as many people as I can. I've said that since I decided to go back to law school. Like, what is your aim? I wrote an essay to get in law school. What is the essay about? I'm going to law school because I want to help people. I don't even know what that looks like, but I know that maybe I can do more from that position than I could from laying on my couch on Laura tabs and complaining about how shitty my life is, right?
And Eddie, I could have picked probably a million different ways that this interview would have gone, and I wouldn't have been even close. I'm pissed that we started late because we're up against the clock, but I really appreciate you coming on, man. And I would echo Dylan's comment. I would love to have you back, preferably sooner than later, because this has been a great conversation, man. You have an amazing story, and I think we only just scratched the surface of it due to time constraints today.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any last words, Eddie, before I close this out?
I would just echo the same point that if you're here, if you're listening to this right now, you can still achieve anything that you put your mind to. And I know people have said that forever, but until you actually feel it on the inside, and then you know it to be true, and you walk in the faith that you can, it's the most powerful, liberating feeling. And I hope as many people can feel the way that I feel on the inside as possible. And I know plenty of people that do, because I talk to them every day, and more people are starting to have their own awakenings every day, that everything we've been told our whole lives is not the case, right? We were conditioned and bred to be something that we are not by nature, so getting back to some of that natural aspects of what we're here to do, and how much better life can be when you actually tap into it. That's the only thing that matters at this point.
Yeah. So personally, I can go off on that for a very, very long time, and we'll have that conversation at another point. But the quote that I want to put in here, so this is by Henry Ford, I believe is anything that the mind of man can conceive and believe, so you need both, he can achieve. So to echo that sentiment is, you can do anything that you set your mind to, so long as you conceive it, you think about it, and believe it, it will happen for you. Eddie, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've taken a whole bunch of notes. So that's always a good thing when you got a bunch of rider downers. And I hope you guys at home have done the same thing and taken notes. And go follow Eddie. We'll make sure to have him back to actually talk more about law and how we can help other folks in construction, obviously dealing with injuries and that kind of thing, but to get into some nuances and some tactical pieces on law. But this has really been a great conversation. Again, Eddie, thank you so much for coming on. Guys, make the decision. You've probably got something weighing on you, something that's unmade, and that causes as much stress as anything else. So whatever that decision, whatever that step you need to take, go ahead and make it, and you will be better off for it. So Eddie, thank you so much again. There's so much flow there, man. You're a great speaker, and have a lot of just greatness in you and inspiration for many people to come. And I hope you guys find the same from this episode and from Eddie, of his words of encouragement and just wisdom, man. So thank you so much, guys. Share the show, and we'll see you next time. That's this episode of the Construction Corner Podcast. Till next time.